Hey guys, welcome to another craft break. I am Bianca, a content creator here at Plaid. On Wednesdays, we get together to do fun Mod Podge projects together, but today we wanted to take some time to answer questions about using Mod Podge with napkins. One of my favorite things to do is to craft with Mod Podge and napkins. So we wanted to answer a few questions that you guys may have. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to use the two together for any of your upcoming holiday projects or just some projects that you plan to do in general. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna switch over to our overhead camera. I have some napkins here that are holiday themed because Christmas is coming up. You can grab any type of pattern napkins that you would like. I am going to give you some tips on what type of pattern napkins to choose out. But as far as design goes, get creative as you would like. So, first thing that I do want to mention is your napkins are going to have ply backings. Some napkins have 1 or 2 plies. So before crafting with your napkins and your Mod Podge, you want to always make sure that you are removing the backing. And let's actually slide this one over for a second. So I'm going to show you what it's like to do it by hand, and then I'm going to show you what it's like to do it with tape. So, and I'll hold it up a little bit so that you can see it. So typically it is a little tricky to try to separate your napkin from the ply. This one actually fell apart pretty easily, but sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. If you do find that to be the case with the napkins that you are using, you can grab some tape. So you can use regular tape or you can use painter's tape. I'm gonna tear a small piece of painter's tape here, and I'm gonna lay it onto the corner of our napkin, and I'm doing it from the front, not from the back where the ply is. And I am going to pull it back, and that actually helps to separate it from our napkin. So we're gonna slowly pull the tab of tape. So let's actually separate this just a little bit more. Actually, let's grab another piece. Let's start from a different corner. So let's see. Let's grab another piece of our painter's tape. And again, like I said, you can use regular tape. If you have double-sided tape, you can use that as well. Or you can use your fingers, but this is just a quick and easy tip that you guys can do at home that makes it a little bit easier. All right, so we are gonna pull it back with the tape, and you wanna do it slowly. You don't want to pull it too fast because you don't want to rip the front of your napkin. So this napkin actually only has 1 ply. Again, like I said, some napkins have 1 or 2 plies. If you, of course, have 2, you're going to have to repeat this process another time. So we are pulling it back slowly. And then once all of your ply is off, you will be ready to craft. All right, so hopefully your napkin falls apart easily, but if it doesn't, this is just a quick trick that you can use to help get the 2 pieces separated from each other.
Bianca, I have a question that I wanted to read to you. Patty Loves Crafting asked, can you add metallic multi-surface paint as accents to the napkin, and would you do that before or after Mod Podging?
Yes, you definitely can add that type of paint. I would probably use that before you actually add the Mod Podge on. So you would want to add your napkin, of course, onto whatever surface it is that you are going to be using. And then what I would do is add my paint wherever I want to add it onto my napkin. And then to seal and protect the paint in the napkin, I would go over it with my Mod Podge once my paint is dried.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Cool.
Okay, so when you are choosing out your napkin, a suggestion, especially if you are going to be creating a project where you kind of want it to look neat and you just want it to look a little bit uniformed, I suggest getting a busy pattern, one where if you do have to cut your napkin into strips to actually make it fit onto your surface or your project, it won't look weird when you try to match it up with other pieces. So if you try to do this with a napkin that has straight lines on it or a pattern where it has to be perfect, your project might not look the best when you finish. So you want to get a busy pattern. That way you can disguise the imperfections on your finished project. And if you guys have questions about that or you want me to elaborate a little more, just let me know and I will try to go a little bit more in depth. But you do want to try to get a busy pattern. Something with floral on it is always great. This is probably a good pattern to use. Using a plaid napkin when you are trying to do a decoupage project, especially if your project is going to be rounded or it is an odd shape, it's probably not going to come out the best. Now, if you are using a surface that is flat and only goes in one direction, that is a project where you probably will be able to get away with a napkin that has that pattern or design on it. Again, you might run into the point where you need to match your napkins up to fit the size of the surface. You can try to do that as best as possible, or you can try to use a surface that will fit the size of that napkin where you don't have to combine more than one to try to cover it. So that is one of my biggest tips when picking out your napkins that you will be decoupaging with. Again, let me know if you guys have any questions about that. All right, so I have a small surface here that I am going to apply my napkin onto. So we're not going to do an actual project together today. I just more so want to show you guys how to apply your napkins onto a surface and some tips and tricks on how to get off any excess paper when you are trying to make your finished project look nice and neat. So I am going to grab some Mod Podge. I am using the matte formula here, but before I actually go ahead and do this, I want to go through some of our formulas that you can use for decoupaging. You can use super gloss. You can also use outdoor. This is one of our newer Mod Podge formulas, and this is super matte. So let's grab our last three. We also have gloss. We have matte. Again, this is what I'm using today. And then we also have satin. So these are other formulas that you can use to apply napkins onto your surfaces and all of the projects that you will be crafting. Again, if you guys have any questions about those different formulas and how you can use them with napkins, just let me know and I will get those answered for you.
Yeah, all of them can be used with napkins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I am going to lightly, and I do want to put an emphasis on lightly, cover my surface with my matte Mod Podge. When you are using Mod Podge with napkins, you don't want to use too much. This is very thin, and if you use too much Mod Podge, you could potentially tear your napkin, or you could also make it really soggy, and then you'll have a lot of air bubbles and wrinkles. So you want to lightly cover your surface. And another thing I want to mention before we actually apply the Mod Podge onto the surface is whatever napkin you are using, you want to try to make sure that the surface you are applying it to closely matches the color of the napkin. So This napkin has a white background, and I want to make sure that the surface I am putting it on is also white or as close to white as possible, because the napkin is really thin, and then when we apply the Mod Podge, it's going to make it very opaque. So we're going to be able to see through this napkin, and if you want your napkin to look seamless and you want it to look nice and you don't want it to look like a napkin at all, you want it to almost look hand painted on, you don't want to see pink or red shining through your napkin. So make sure that your project or the surface that you are applying your napkin to is as close to the color of the napkin as possible. So if your napkin has a pink background, make sure that you are base coating your surface with a pink color, or you're using a surface that is already pink. So that is another really big tip when using napkins and Mod Podge together. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add a light coat of my Mod Podge. Again, you can use any of the formulas that we just went through. Each of them have a different finish, and that is the only difference. But other than that, you're gonna use them in the exact same way that we're doing with the matte formula. So we're doing a light coat, not too much. And then we are going to slowly lay our napkin onto the surface. You can use this technique on glass, you can use it on wood, you can use it on ceramic, you can use it on metal. You can pretty much do this technique, I would basically say, on almost any surface, and it's the exact same process. All right, so I'm just thinning this out a little bit more. I just want to make sure I don't have too much. Again, we don't want to tear the napkin or make it too wet. So I am going to start from one side, and I am going to use my fingers to slowly tap. I always suggest to tap your fingers to lay your napkin down. You don't want to rub, because that could potentially create a tear. So I am slowly tapping my napkin, taking my time. This is not something that you want to rush, so you probably want to turn on a good show or some music and take your time. This is one of those projects that will turn out perfectly imperfect. There is no way to get all of the wrinkles out, but you do want to try to get out as much as possible. So we are slowly tapping. Again, do not try to rush through this. It's not going to turn out the best, so take your time. And if you have a bigger surface that you are using this technique on, you might want to go in smaller sections. So something that I want to do at home personally is I have a desk that I purchased from Goodwill, and I want to cover the entire thing in decorative napkins and Mod Podge. So I am going to have to go in smaller sections. I'll probably pull out each drawer and do them one by one. Mod Podge dries pretty quickly, so if I were to cover the entire desk with Mod Podge and then say, oh, I'll add my napkins on one by one, by the time I get to the other side of the desk, that Mod Podge will have already been dried, and then I'll have to waste my Mod Podge and add another coat. So if you have a bigger surface, make sure you're going in smaller sections. When you have a rounded surface, I am using a flat one here, so this is pretty easy. If you're using a rounded surface, you're gonna probably wanna cut your napkin into strips. Because of course, laying something that is flat onto a rounded object is not going to come out the best. So you're gonna have to cut your napkin into strips and sections. And I have a finished project to show you guys, so that you have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So when you are using a rounded surface, you want to make sure you're cutting your napkin into strips, and that goes back to using a pattern that is a little bit more busy, because when you go to match up the strips that you have cut, you're not going to be able to see where the pattern begins or ends. It'll make it look seamless, and it'll make it look neat. So I am adding a little bit of Mod Podge here. Our napkin was not sticking, so I'm just adding a little bit more. All right, so my napkin is on my surface. I'm just going around a little bit more with my fingers to tap and make sure that it is all the way down. And then we are going to get off some of this excess paper. So, of course, the first thing we go to is scissors. And while those are a great way to get off the excess paper, that is not the only way. And I will show you some other ways that I like to get some of my paper off of my surface when I am using Mod Podge and napkins. So I'm gonna flip this over and we will cut with scissors. And I will show you the difference between doing this and some of the other techniques that I have to show you guys. So I'm gonna hold this up so you guys can see how, you know, it looks good from here, but it's still a little separated. And that's because with scissors, you can't really get it exact unless you're gonna tuck your napkin underneath your surface. I don't really want to do that because what if you want to have a design on the front and the back? You know, you might want to have one side for Christmas and then you might want to flip this over and do something for New Year's. So I am going to grab a sanding block. You can use a sanding block or you can use a small piece of sandpaper to make your edges nice and neat. And I always think that this almost makes the napkin melt into the surface so it looks seamless and it almost looks like it was painted on versus glued on. So I am going to lightly, and again, the napkin is very, very thin, so you do not want to be heavy-handed with the sanding paper or the sanding block. Again, take your time. You do want to start with your scissors by getting the napkin as close to the edge as possible, but not too close where you cut the napkin into the surface. So lightly go around your edges, and that will help with getting your napkins exact to the edge of your surface. And if you do this technique and your napkin does lift up a little bit around the edges, you can use your Mod Podge on top of the napkin to lay it down a little bit. So just lightly, not too much. I'll try to hold this up so that you guys can see. All right, so let's do a little bit more around this edge here. So I'm getting my napkin close to the edge, but not too close. And then I'm now going to switch over to the sanding paper, and we are going to rub down. Of course, you don't want to rub up because that is going to lift your napkin up. You want to rub down. Again, take your time. Take your time. Use your Mod Podge again if you need to, if your napkin lifts up. So I'm just going to do this a little more, and then I'll show you the difference between just using scissors to try to clean up your edges and using a sanding block or sandpaper. All right, so hopefully you guys can see the difference on camera, but a second ago when we had just cut, actually this is a good example here. So trying to use the scissors, this is how the napkin turns out, but when you sand it, you can see how it makes it flush to the edge of the surface. All right, so Another trick that I like to use, especially with a surface that has really weird edges and it's hard to get in those crevices, is to burn the edges of your napkin. This is a technique that you do want to be careful with. You will need a torch or a lighter. And you do want to keep a cup of water nearby just in case you have any accidents. But we are going to use a torch to clean up these edges now. This is a technique that might not always turn out perfect. So if you are going to do this, I would suggest using this technique on a project that you don't mind having a rustic or weathered look in the end, just in case your edges do not necessarily turn out perfect. This is a technique that you do have to practice over and over to make sure you are able to get it perfect. So I am going to grab this torch, and you can see where I've already gone ahead and cut the napkin down. You do not want to have so much paper hanging off because you don't want your flame to be too big. So I am cutting off, or have cut off, some of the napkin to reduce the size of the flame. And what's going to happen is I'm going to light this, and the flame will stop right here around the edges, because wherever the Mod Podge is where the flame stops at. So
This is always such a cool technique.
yeah, this is a really fun technique. It's really fun, which is probably not the best thing, because sometimes I just want to do it just because it's fun.
Yeah.
But again, this is a great technique to use when you have a surface that has weird edges and sides where it's kind of hard to get inside of, maybe like a wooden letter or an A where you can't get your scissors or your sanding block in there. The flame kind of helps you out. All right, so let's start here. So you can see where it is going right around the edge. I'm gonna hold this up. Yep, thank you, Steven. So see how it perfectly rounds out the edges. So this is really fun and really cool, and it is a great technique to use. Again, the reason that it is not burning all of the napkin is because the flame is getting close to where the Mod Podge is, and the Mod Podge is wet, so it automatically is going to put out your flame. So this is a great way to get off that excess napkin. And then if you need to still go in and clean up your edges, you can go over it again with your sanding block or your sanding paper. And I'm gonna hold this up close so you guys can see the edges, and you can see what I mean by it being imperfect as well. If this is a project where you don't want to see burnt edges, I'm sorry, not burnt, burned edges, like I said, you might want to go with a project that you don't mind looking a little bit more farmhousey or rustic in the end. So let's see, these edges actually came out kind of perfect. But here is one side where you can kind of see it's a little burned. Sometimes you may notice that your flame may come up onto the paper and burn some of the edges that you didn't mean to, and that's probably because wherever it burned the edges, there was no Mod Podge. So this is a technique that you do want to practice over and over again, but it is one of my favorites. And as you can see, it cleaned the edges up on this surface perfectly. So
I like what you said about it being really good for like a surface that's a weird shape, like a
yeah.
wood letter or something. That makes this really applicable.
Yep. So if you find like a really cool wooden word, maybe something that spells out a phrase, and you're finding it kind of hard to get up in there, to get all of the edges cleaned up, grab a torch or a lighter. Again, keep a cup of water near you just in case you need to put your flame out. But that will really help with cleaning up the edges of your surface. So those are pretty much the basics of applying a napkin onto a surface. Someone asked earlier, can you use paint on top of the napkin? You absolutely can, but just like with the Mod Podge, you don't want to add too much. This is very thin. You do not want to oversaturate it. You don't want to create tears or rips, and if you add too much paint, that is what will happen. I do love the idea of adding pops of metallic on top of napkins. I think that that is a beautiful look. And once you do that, if you want to seal and protect your napkin, you can always go over it with another layer of Mod Podge. So I'm actually going to do that now, and then I'm going to pull out some finished projects for you guys to see. All right, so I am lightly going over this with a layer of Mod Podge. This will seal and protect the napkin. This is optional, but I highly suggest doing this just because this is such a thin material, especially if you want to keep this project over time. Adding a top coat will protect it and make sure that it stays protected. And this is where you can incorporate some other formulas if you do not want to have a matte finish. This is where you can maybe add the gloss formula. We also have satin. We also have dishwasher safe Mod Podge. This is a technique that you can also use with that formula, and I do have a finished project to show you guys where you can incorporate the dishwasher safe. So I am lightly going over this, and then it should dry in about 30 minutes or less, and your project will be good to go. And this is one of my favorite techniques to transform anything. You guys can cover up lampshades, you can cover shoes, you can cover tables, you can cover cups, plates, and I'm getting ready to show you a few examples before we get out of here. If you guys have any questions so far, please let us know and we will get those answered. So I'm holding it up so that you can see it. Again, take your time at home with this. Do not try to rush through applying napkins onto surfaces with Mod Podge.
We had a comment that says they really like the singe technique.
I do too. That's my favorite. I think that's my favorite Mod Podge hack. All right, so I'm going to pull out some finished projects to give you guys some inspiration. So we'll start with these three. These are glass plates, and this is actually a great example of combining paint and Mod Podge. I know someone asked earlier, can you combine metallic paint and Mod Podge? And this is actually an example of that. This is a glass plate, and this is actually a great example of using dishwasher safe Mod Podge. So the napkin has been applied to the back of it. You of course don't want to add it onto the top of your plate. So this is more so of a decorative charger. I would not suggest using this as a plate that you or your guests will be eating off of, but this is definitely a great decor piece that you can add onto your tablescape. And again, this has been sealed and protected with the dishwasher safe Mod Podge formula. And same for this one as well. So this is another great way to use napkins. If you don't want to use the entire napkin pattern, you can cut out elements of the napkins and you can apply them to your surface. So this at one point was a full napkin. We went and we cut out the flowers and we added them onto the surface. Again, this is our dishwasher safe Mod Podge formula. I always say if it was handmade, you do want to hand wash it. I suggest hand washing it, but if you do need to place it in a dishwasher, you want to make sure that you are placing this on the top rack and that you are using a gentle cycle. So these are two of our glass examples where you can use Mod Podge and napkins together. This is a terracotta pot, and we have used our outdoor Mod Podge formula on this project. So you can keep this outside and the napkin is protected and sealed from the outdoor elements with our Mod Podge matte formula. And with all of these projects, you're going to do the exact same technique that I just showed you guys on the wood surface that I used. There's no difference. The only thing different with this type of surface is that you're going to cut your napkin into strips like I mentioned earlier so that you can easily cover your surface. You're not going to be able to use one whole napkin to wrap around this. You're going to have to cut it into smaller strips. And then we have a smaller wood surface here. So exact same technique that we used on the surface a few minutes ago with our Christmas tree pattern. What I do want to point out here is that this surface was not painted. You do not have to paint your surface. You only need to paint your surface when you want to make sure that you are not seeing the surface through the napkin. So if you're not wanting to see the wood grain or the glass or the original ceramic color, then you base coat it. But I really like how the wood grain is coming through the napkin on here. This was done on purpose. So if you don't want to see the wood grain or the original glass or ceramic color, that is when you base coat your surface so that it matches the background of your napkin. All right. So we have another dishwasher safe example here. So this is a thermal that has been covered with one of our glitter Mod Podges, and as you can see the napkins here, and we've covered them with the dishwasher safe Mod Podge formula. This is a really fun project. I know everyone is buying Stanley cups right now, so if you wanted to customize yours, this is a great way to do that. All right.
Bianca, we have a comment that says, I'm going to be Mod Podging napkins to everything, LOL.
You sound like me. I literally put napkins on everything. So this is a great example of using a busy pattern napkin. So this is a really round surface. This is a pumpkin. There's absolutely no way that you are going to cover this without cutting your napkin into strips. And if you were to use a napkin that has straight lines or a pattern that absolutely had to be matched up, your project would not turn out seamless like this. So when we cut this into strips and we apply them onto the pumpkin, it made it so that you can't tell where the pattern begins or ends. You have to be looking super, super close, and even if you look super close, you still cannot tell. So this is a great example of using a busy pattern napkin, especially when you are using or applying your napkins onto a round surface. And then I have one more project that I want to show you. And that is this. So I think this was the very first project that I ever used napkins and Mod Podge together on. And I actually used the wood burning technique to clean up my edges on this project. And the reason I did that is because you can see where I can't really get in here with a piece of sanding paper or scissors, so I had to use the torch to go in and clean up those edges. So that is our last project. Before we get out of here, if you guys have any questions at all, please let us know. We hope that you are inspired and that you have gotten a bunch of ideas in your head so that you can go and use napkins and Mod Podge together. Again, like I said, this is one of my favorite techniques, if not my most favorite. It's very fun. Christmas is coming up, so you can use napkins and Mod Podge on your ornaments. You can use them on some flat surfaces that look like Christmas trees, or you can make a table runner, or just anything. You can honestly put napkins and Mod Podge on almost anything. So if you guys do not have any questions, we will get out of here. We will see you next week for another craft break, and have a great weekend. Thank you guys so much for joining us.